Hello, everybody. Welcome to the program Face to Face Talk with ITSM Heroes. I am Kiran Kumar Pabbathi, hosting the program, and today the guest of the program is Mark Smalley, born in England and currently living in Netherlands. He is an IT consultant with 30 plus years of experience. Welcome to the program, Mark.
Thank you very much. I must say you call this session the IT Heroes. I feel a bit of an imposter because I'm not an IT hero. I think I'm more of an IT student. There's still so much to learn about IT.
That shows your simplicity and humbleness, Mark. Thanks very much for giving your valuable time. I am very much sure our audience will be very happy to see you and learn many things from your experiences and the sharings that you're going to give now. So let's get into the interview. So my first question to you would be, can you please tell us about yourself and your work experience, the experiences that or the positions or the job positions that you've took in the last 30 years?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. You mentioned I was born in the UK. I was born in London. I met a Dutch girl when I was about 19. We got married in England. And then we moved to the Netherlands, and we live just outside Amsterdam, which is a very nice place to live. 3 kids in their 30s now, and I got into the IT business as a programmer at the end of the 70s, and so really the application area, software area, that was where I started in IT. I developed into the application maintenance area rather than initial development. So you can see I'm sort of moving into maintenance and management of IT systems. I've been a trainer consultant, I've been a people manager, done sales support, product development, marketing, and more recently I've been, as a public speaker, I had the pleasure to engage with thousands of people at conferences in more than 20 countries and 4 continents, I believe. So that sort of gets me around the world, and I do that on behalf of the not-for-profit ASL-BSL Foundation, which hopefully we could talk about a little bit later, spreading the word for them. I also work for APMG International, who do the certification for the ASL and BSL qualifications. I'm a trainer for Gaming Works, who some of our audience may know from the Apollo 13 game, which is often used in ITSM and ITIL, in the ITIL context. I do a bit of work for Pink Elephant from time to time, and I'm self-employed. My company is called Smalley.it. So I think that's a little introduction to myself.
Yeah, I have gone through that website and it has got very excellent information. Yeah, I have explored all the articles. Not all of them, I would say at least 60 to 70% of them. And yeah, it's a very good website that you manage.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I like to share the stuff that I have. It's no good keeping it. You've got to share it.
Okay, well, so as you just mentioned that you are the brand ambassador for ASL and BISL. So can you please explain us in detail what is this framework and how different is it, with respect to ITIL or any other ITSM best practices?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we're talking about 2 frameworks. ASL stands for the Application Services Library. And I'll talk about that first. It was inspired by ITIL in the late 1990s. We saw in the Netherlands, we saw that ITIL was gaining interest, helping people, particularly in the IT infrastructure management area, to professionalize the way they did stuff. And somebody at the Dutch National Computer Center thought, yeah, this is great, this is good for the infrastructure side, but what about the application people? So, seriously inspired by ITIL, he came up with this framework called the Application Services Library, which describes the kind of things that application people do in order to support applications, second and third line support, maintenance and renewal, and application portfolio management and lifecycle management. So it's really the whole area of what happens to an application after the initial development. So that's the first framework. And that's for IT departments on the supply side. And you could put it in parallel with ITIL, where ITIL offers guidance for IT services in general. You could say ASL gives a focus on the application management area and extends the excellent guidance in ITIL to cover parts that ITIL doesn't cover. And one of the first references I'd like to make, and we'll share this with the audience somehow or other, is to a paper that I wrote with Sharon Taylor, who many of our audience will know as the chief architect of ITIL version 3. We wrote a paper comparing ITIL and ASL in 2008, and that's that's on the Axelos site. I'll give you the link to that so we can share that with our audience. Now the other framework is not on the IT supply side, but it's on the IT demand side. So think for a minute in terms of enterprises that use IT. They typically have an IT department that collaborates with various suppliers to provide IT systems and services. But you've got people on the other side of the fence in the business who are more focused on what is our demand for information and related technology, what do we want, and how do we tell the IT department what we want. And when the IT department's done its stuff, they come back with the systems and the IT services, the business obviously has to use the systems to get the value out of them. Because absolutely no value is realized until people actually use systems. And this other framework of ours, the Business Information Services Library, which we call BSL for short, focuses on the demand and use side of IT rather than supply. So you can see there's a complement between the ITIL framework and the ASL framework that approach things from a supply side, and the BSL framework, which interlocks nicely with the two to represent the business's interests. So we're talking about two different frameworks.
Right.
And again, there's a paper that we wrote with Sharon Taylor from an ITIL perspective, comparing ITIL and the BSL framework. And I'll be pleased to share that link with you later on.
Sure, yeah. Okay. Fine.
And I think we should also refer our audience to the ASL BSL Foundation website. That's aslbislfoundation.org, and we'll include that reference in the follow-up material.
Sure, definitely. I will include all these, the reference materials that you're talking about. I'm gonna make a note of it, and I'm gonna put all that links to all our audiences.
Good.
Okay. So my next question would be, you spent more than 30 plus years of experience in IT. So you've been seeing how ITIL has been grooming up. Like 1980s, probably it was V1, and then V2, and then V3 in 2008 and 2011. There was some updates. So what is your opinion on the developments that's happening with respect to ITIL?
Well, I think, in fact, you just referred to ITIL version 1. I think if I look at my bookshelf behind me,
wow.
Yeah, I'll be able to. Yeah, there's something of a little, possibly a little historic interest for some of our audience. An introduction to the IT infrastructure library, and that's from CCTA, and just as a point of interest, the 4th edition, March 1994. So we can see
1994.
this,
Okay.
yeah, and it refers to 1987. That's the earliest date, but that's referring back to a British standards norm. But it started off in the 90s. I think I'm not really the right guy to ask to comment on the content of the various versions of ITIL. I've obviously followed the developments and seen how it's expanded, and also seen, I think, the difficulty that that you obviously have with an enormous volume of work to incorporate all of the contributions of various authors and make them all consistent. I think that's one of the challenges you have. It's really a great volume of work. But I think the major comment I'd like to make is, because there's been so much interest for ITIL, this reflects the importance of IT service management for enterprises. Because increasingly we're relying on information systems on the one hand. On the other hand, the information systems are becoming more complex and difficult to manage. So really, two sides: the need to manage information systems and services from a business perspective because of the value that they give to enterprises on the one side, but also to manage the inherent complexity of information systems. That really underlines the fact that we need excellent guidance to help us in the right direction. I think ITIL and other frameworks, we could refer to COBIT, to, of course, the ASL and BSL frameworks and other frameworks. These frameworks help us, I think, in terms of developing technical practices which we have to follow, but that's not all. I think we also have to think in terms of the kind of mindset that you need to apply the practices. And that's something that's possibly, I'm not quite sure whether the frameworks are well equipped to cover that side of the equation. But we certainly need more on the cultural norms and mindsets in addition to the kind of processes we should be following.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, speaking about ITIL, and certainly speaking about one of the first versions, reminds me of a true ITSM hero, Ivor McFarlane, who comes up with some great quotes from time to time. And talking about ITIL, he said ITIL, and it's also valid for other frameworks, ITIL is a great place to start your thinking, but a terrible place to stop. Because it contains we talk about best practices, but increasingly people are not talking about best practices, but are talking about good practices. It contains examples of how other companies, other organizations have used ITIL or any other framework in their specific environment. But you would be very stupid to blindly adopt the guidance that another company has followed instead of tailoring it, adjusting it, adapting it to your own organization. So it's a great place to start, but a terrible place to stop. I thought Ivor McFarlane, really wonderful guidance for him.
Okay, that's actually so true. Today, most of the organizations just follow, or rather, I wouldn't say that it's most of the organizations, probably some of the consultants just take this ITIL practices as, some kind of benchmarks, and, or rather, it's something considered like a Bible, and they just want to follow that, irrespective of the business requirements. So that's not the purpose of ITIL practices at all. It was a best practice which can be adapted and adopted. So so there is some kind of issues there. Okay. Okay, let me ask you another question. With respect to the metamorphosis of ITIL V1, V2, and V3. Well, I started off my career in 2003. That was in ITSM domain. But what I read and what I heard about ITIL V1 was something like ITIL V1 had numerous books. Like as of now, we have 26 processes and 4 functions in V3, but then in ITIL V1, I heard that the number of processes were more than 30 or something. Do you have any idea? Do you want to comment anything on that? Or is that true? Or did I hear the right thing?
Well, there were certainly there were lots of books. I think I had about 6 of them. I
Wow.
recently gave them to somebody. Apart from this last one, which I gave them to somebody who's making a sort of a library of historical books. But as you can see, it's a fairly small book, and this is as the introductory book. This is on the small side. But the books in general were fairly um, compact works, as opposed to the current volumes of ITIL, which are really, really extensive. Yeah, I can't remember, to be honest, how many processes there were, but it's certainly the guidance has expanded.
Okay.
But if you look, and I think this is something quite paradoxical, if you look at the amount of guidance in ITIL as opposed to the guidance that people actually use, then there's a great difference. Because ITIL covers the whole spectrum of IT service management, yet when you see practitioners applying the guidance, they usually focus on incident, problem, change, and possibly, maybe they're talking about five or 10 processes on which they're focusing, and 10 is probably a lot. So the guidance is enormous, but people tend to focus on the core processes. They still seem to be having trouble getting the basics under control.
Yeah. Okay. I have a question with respect to the book that you're showing now. So the book that, I mean, it looks very thin. So I'm just wondering, is this book covering all of those processes? I mean, at least the most important processes which were there in V2, like service desk, incident management, problem management, change management, release management, and configuration management, with respect to service operations. And on the other side, we have service delivery processes like our availability management, financial management, capacity management, service level management, and service continuity management. So are all these processes, that is 5 processes, 5 plus 5, 10 processes plus 1 function. So is that book containing all these processes, 10 processes plus 1 function?
No, well, this is just the introductory book. I was just having a look at it to see whether it referred to the other books, and no, this probably isn't really. I don't know. Can you read that?
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. It's pretty much legible. Okay, that's
Yeah,
great.
I'll just read it. They talk about the various sets of books: the managers set, the service support set, the service delivery set, software support set, that was a separate one, networks set, and computer operations. And within those sets, there are various books. So I'm just counting here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. I think 22 various books in the 6 set that the initial version of ITIL has defined. So you can see some, if we talk about the service support set and the service delivery set, you can sort of map them to service operations, service design, transition. I think somebody's probably made a mapping of that. It's certainly of historical interest. And there is, if anybody's interested, if you Google the history of ITIL, you'll come across a couple of sources which are quite interesting. They explain how it was conceived and the people involved at the beginning. So really, and we should be aware of this because our industry is still very young, but our pioneers are starting to retire from the industry. And with the retirement of the pioneers, we're losing a bit of the initial history. So I think from a historical perspective, is essential that we capture how did this thing start, so that for future generations, just imagine in 100 years' time, when people reflect back on the IT revolution, it would be great if we could, like I'm just showing you this book. Great if we had access to how this all started off.
Yeah, definitely, yes. And I'm really very glad that I'm asking these questions and giving all this information to our audiences.
Okay. Yeah, I remember at the beginning, just before ITIL was announced, was released, IBM was doing a lot in the IT service management space, and I attended one of the first conferences about IT service management according to IBM. Unfortunately, I've lost the book. There was a little booklet, so that's a bit of historical evidence which has vanished. But they were one of the big players at the start of the IT service management movement.
Okay. Okay, so now I would want to know, as you work as an IT consultant, so I would like to know what were the greatest hassles that you faced while doing IT consulting, and also, if you want to share the issues or the hassles that you faced while IT trainings, you can also share that.
Yeah, I think I'd like to combine them really, because there's some overlap there, and it's something we often come across at conferences. There's a excellent conference speaker called Paul Wilkinson, who talks about attitude, behavior, and culture. He talks about the ABC of IT. And about more about the soft side, personal people's behavior and things like that. And he's been talking at conferences for about 10 years now, and doing research on the kind of obstacles that people come across. And one of the disappointing findings that he shares with the audience is that after 10 years of speaking to people about the importance of attitude, behavior, and culture to actually get things done, people don't seem to have changed that much. And that's one of the things that I've come across with training and consultancy. It's easy enough to get people into a classroom to talk about ITIL or ASL or BSL or improving their IT management. But making the step from talking about it to people actually doing stuff, that is the major challenge. People have great, they come to a conference. They usually come to a conference or to a training or to a workshop, usually well-intentioned, well-meaning to get some value out of it. But after the workshop's finished and they get back to the office, to their day job, it seems everything seems to evaporate. So, the resolutions that people have during a workshop or a training or a conference, yes, I'm going to do this. They maybe only if just 10% of all of the resolutions happen, I think that's a lot. So I think that's certainly one of the major challenges to help people do stuff with the knowledge that they've acquired in a training after when they get back to work and are bombarded with the daily incidents and problems and changes that they have to deal with. I think that's as far as I'm concerned, that's a major struggle, people actually doing stuff. And just referring back to our discussion about the development of ITIL from version 1, 2, 3, and so on, I think the incremental changes in guidance in the frameworks are insignificant in comparison to people's inability to actually do something with the guidance.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have an enormous amount of guidance, but if people aren't doing anything with it, then it's absolutely useless. So we should be certainly focusing on not only having excellent guidance, but helping people do things with it.
Okay. So I understand the point. So yes, in the conferences we come up with different kinds of action items. Okay, we're going to do this, this, this. So do you think continual service improvement is that team who can be actually placed as a like a PMO, you know, someone like a PMO who can actually track all these action items and help the other operational teams and the management teams to prioritize them and then enforce these action items into the operational activities. Do you think CSI would be the right team to take the charge and get these things implemented?
Yeah, I've got a couple of thoughts about that. One is that you shouldn't really need to have a separate team. CSI should be part of your DNA. It should be something. It should be a way of thinking, a way of living, continualism,
Right.
continual improvement. On the one side, on the other side, this is human nature, and it's sometimes people need somebody to sort of keep them on the straight line, on the straight road. So it certainly helps if you've got somebody reminding you about your resolutions and saying, you know, what do you need to do it? Can I help you? Reminding you of deadlines. So it's a bit two-sided. On the one hand, you shouldn't really need it. It should be instilled in you as a way of doing things, continually improving the way you work. Yeah. On the other hand, it does help if somebody helps you with that. Another reference that our audience might like to take a look at is a great little YouTube video on the work of Daniel Pink. Daniel Pink wrote a book called Drive. And if you look on Google, Daniel Pink Drive RSA, you'll find one of those great little videos where people draw a picture, draw a story. Daniel Pink talks about 3 factors that influence your personal satisfaction at work and also your performance. He talks about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. 3 things. Autonomy. If you give people the freedom to make choices using their professional judgment, that's usually beneficial for their motivation because you give them responsibility. You find that people are motivated when they have the opportunity to master their discipline, to improve the way they work, improve how they deal with incidents, improve how they program things, improve how they teach. And finally, purpose. When people are aware of the effect at the end of the chain, you know, I'm in a cubicle doing my work. But what does this mean for the company? What does this mean for the customer? What does this mean for society? If you're doing something which is, in the end, you're contributing to something which is actually meaningful, then that really motivates people. Right. And it reminds me with another talk that we might like to reference. One of my industry colleagues in the United States, Mark Kawasaki, gave a great talk. A webinar, so it's recorded. We can point people in that direction without any slides, just telling a story. And he spoke about talking with an industry colleague and sharing experiences. And this industry colleague of Mark's explained that he or she worked at I think it was a medical research institute where they were developing a cure for cancer. And Mark Kawasaki, who was in a different area at the time, he said, I never get that kind of feel. I don't never get that kind of association that I'm doing something which is really has real societal value. And he came up with a great quote. I think this is 2013. There's value beyond business value, which I thought was really fundamental. You know, we think about doing things which are beneficial to the company goals, satisfied customers, profit, stuff like that. But if you look just one step behind to society, how are we improving the world? That is something that really motivates people. So that, I don't know how we got onto this, but that was a little sidetrack I wanted to explore.
That's great. Okay. Now, in the current version, ITIL V3, we've got 26 processes and 4 functions. So do you think there is too much redundancy? Like, okay, let me put it more precise. Like, especially in service transition, we get to see change management, and then we get to see release and deployment management, and then we see change evaluation, and then we see service validation and testing. I understand that there is, demarcations for each and every process, but now ITIL V3 has become with 26 processes and 4 functions. And for critics, now they say ITIL has got too much redundancy, and ITIL is very difficult for implementation now. Now the philosophy is, the critics' philosophy is, ITIL is very difficult for implementation. So do you actually agree with this point that yes, ITIL has got too much redundancy, and it's not necessary, we can actually make it cut short? So what's your opinion on this?
Well, I think you certainly need a handbook to be able to understand how to read the IT guidance. You have to understand that the volumes reflect the service stages, the phases that you go through. And you mentioned change management, I believe. Change management goes through various stages. So depending on what stage you're interested in, you'll focus on a certain aspect of change management, as opposed to what happens in the next stage. But I think if you've got your head around the kind of structure that's been applied in version 3 in 2011, the current version, then it helps you to understand it. But it's an awful lot of guidance. You have to understand how to find the right the bits you want. I think as far as as far as the coverage is concerned, it's something that people have been mentioning for a while. Is there's something that's missing in ITIL is the underlying principles on which ITIL is based. So you could think from an architectural point of view, what are the pillars on which ITIL is based? And quite recently, there's an initiative, I think, that's filling that gap, and it's called the ITIL Manifesto. I think only this week they started it off. I'm not quite sure. I haven't looked at it in detail, but they seem to be going into the principles, and I think that would be very interesting for people to take a look at. ITIL Manifesto.
Okay. So when did this thing came up, ITIL Manifesto? Was this in ITIL V3 2011, or is it something new happening now?
No, this is very new. This is something that that I think in the last weeks or months has been launched.
Okay. Correct, because this was something.
It's so new that I haven't had an opportunity to look into it in detail. What I did notice, it was either yesterday or the day before, that there was some activity on Twitter. So if you look on Twitter, hashtag ITIL Manifesto, I think you'll find that's a starting point. And it's an initiative that Axelos has started, I believe.
Okay. Yeah. I think Axelos would be the right person and the right organization to do that. I'll definitely Google and I'll check on this thing. Okay. Okay. Now we've we all have seen V1, V2, and V3. So if there is a next version for ITIL as V4, so what would be your expectations?
I have absolutely no idea. I think you would probably have to call it version 5, because if we
Oh,
call until version 2011, that may be V4, but they're using a
oh.
different kind of coding now. But as for a next version, I don't know. I don't know. I would like to see, but whether they're going to do it or not, I think it's interesting to look at the current guidance from different perspectives. If we just sort of step back a minute, think about the IT service management ecosystem, or the IT. You might call it the IT service value ecosystem, the ecosystem in which value from IT services is produced. If you start on one end of the chain, you have external service providers that provide services to IT departments in enterprises, and the IT departments in enterprises provide IT services to the business units who actually benefit from the services. So you could say we have three major players in this ecosystem: external service providers, IT departments, and the business itself. And within the business, and this is something that I've seen recently, because of the fact that regular people are becoming more savvy, more IT savvy, more confident with IT, and because it's easier to access IT services from external parties, they are able to bypass the IT department and deal directly with, if I want to get something from Google, I don't need the IT department. I just get my credit card as a business guide. I can buy stuff. So what you're seeing is decentralized IT departments within the business units, in addition to the centralized IT departments within enterprises. So I'd like, just before I refer back to ITIL, I like to refer to centralized IT departments and decentralized I&T functions. And just to clarify that, I talk about I&T, information and technology, as two separate, obviously very intertwined entities, but two entities that deserve to be managed in their own right, I&T. And I talk about an I&T function, not a department within a business unit, because it's usually integrated into the whole business department. So just back to this ecosystem thing, we have the external service providers, we have the centralized IT departments, and within the business we have decentralized I&T functions. Now think about ITIL from these three different perspectives. External service providers take software as a service providers such as Salesforce that provide many applications, but probably the most famous one is the customer relationship management applications. They are doing full-blown ITSM. They're doing everything in order to ensure that their IT service is provided to enterprises. So they're probably using all of ITIL. Now let's move on to the centralized IT departments. I like to split them up into two kinds. One are the traditional IT service departments that are still doing all of the full-blown IT service management. But I think increasingly external service providers are providing the services better, faster, and cheaper than the centralized IT departments. So they're encroaching into the space that the traditional centralized IT departments inhabit, which is making the centralized IT department think, what's up? Where's the future? So I've got this pressure. I've got this pressure from outside, the external service providers, and at the same time, these decentralized I&T functions within the business They're sort of bypassing me. So I'm under pressure from two sides.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
what is the future for the centralized IT department? Lots of people speculate, and I think this is very plausible, that there's a valid future for centralized IT departments as a broker, as an intermediary between demand on the one side and external supply on the other, but only if you can be perceived as adding value. Otherwise, the business is just going to bypass you and deal directly with Salesforce.com.
Right.
Now, just assume, we'll get back to the ITIL and IT service management guidance. If you're a broker, you don't want the full ITIL guidance, you want a subset. You'll be thinking probably in terms of service catalog, maybe business relationship management, information security. I think things which are more about ensuring that the services are acquired properly, supplier management, very important one. Certainly when you're dealing with multiple suppliers, that would be something the broker would do. So we have the external service provider that uses the full-fledged version of ITIL, everything. We have the broker that uses a subset of ITIL. And if you look at the decentralized I&T departments or functions that are really just starting off with doing stuff, and they're quite interesting, they are struggling with the basics. So they're probably looking at ITIL to see how do we deal with incident, problem, and change.
Right.
So think about ITIL and think about other frameworks in terms of these three markets. And I think ITIL would, and this is guidance that framework owners and IT consultants, ITIL and IT service management consultants should think about. Which market are you selling your stuff to? And you should target these three specific markets with three specific pitches, because they have different demands.
Yeah, you're right.
So that was I don't think that really answered your question as you intended it. But I'm saying as the frameworks develop, the framework owners have to be conscious of the different markets in the ecosystem and decide, are they going to target a specific market? Because I don't think you can say, look at this wonderful framework, it covers everything. I think you have to be specific.
Okay. Right now, there is quite a lot of talk on DevOps approach. So what do you think of this approach? Let me put it simple. So what do you think of DevOps with respect to ITSM, or DevOps for ITSM? Do you think it's going to provide any kind of value for the IT organizations and for ITSM stakeholders? So what's your take on it?
Yeah, I think it provides excellent value. I think people who are very keen on following industry developments, they've known about DevOps for several years now. I think everybody, the insiders in the industry, say DevOps is probably at the top of its hype cycle. Yet, many practitioners have never heard of DevOps. So we have this big divide between the insiders who are following the latest trends and the regular people who are doing their work. They, what's this DevOps stuff? So it hasn't reached the majority of practitioners yet, but it has great value. If you just step back a little bit, you can step back to 2000, I believe, when the Agile Manifesto was conceived. Agile was a great development which focused on a multidisciplinary collaboration between the business and IT, and it enabled business and IT together to develop new releases of applications quicker than before, with frequent small releases that were developed.
Correct.
The problem was, and they talk, if you talk about Agile and Scrum, within Scrum, people talk about potentially shippable software increments. And there's nothing wrong with that apart from the word potentially. Because if you deliver this stuff, if you build this stuff quickly, you can result in lots of potentially shippable increments, so being stuck on a pallet but not being shipped to production. So we had this divide between the agile development initiative and a pretty slow bureaucratic IT operations that said, hang on, first we've got to have all these procedures checked, and it's going to take 2 months to get this into production. And this is where DevOps filled the gap, because DevOps extended the great work that Agile had done in multidisciplinary collaboration between the business and development, and extended it to multidisciplinary collaboration between development and operations, which is where the DevOps comes from, development and operation. And DevOps is difficult to pin down in a definition, because it's not a tool, it's not a methodology, it's not an organizational form. It's more of a movement. And another reference for our audience, the Phoenix Project, written by several authors, including Gene Kim. Gene Kim is one of the giants in the DevOps area. Gene Kim recently gave a great definition of DevOps, in which he said it's a set of cultural values, cultural norms, and technical practices that speed up the flow of software, the deployment of software into production, while retaining the reliability and the solidity of IT operations. So it's really about balancing those two things, getting the stuff into operations quickly, into production quickly, but not disturbing IT operations. So that's the great. I think the great thing about DevOps is that whereas the traditional guidance that we find in ITIL and COBIT and other frameworks focuses on the processes, on what Gene Kim would call the technical practices, DevOps gives a lot of emphasis to the cultural norms. So what kind of attitude, what kind of mindset do you have to have when you apply this stuff? And it's all about sharing, it's trusting people, and it's got excellent potential, and I see companies getting value out of it. It used to be just applied in very particular kinds of companies, like Netflix and eBay, specific kinds of companies which the DevOps community calls the unicorns, a special kind of weird kind of creatures. Whereas regular enterprises, they thought, we're not like eBay or Netflix. We're a normal company. So DevOps, is that good for us? But you can, and increasingly we see enterprises applying the principles of DevOps in their more traditional environment. So it's slowly but surely it's permeating from the rather specialized area like Netflix and eBay into regular companies. Recently, I've been doing a bit of thinking about DevOps and about multidisciplinary collaboration. And just bear with me for a minute to take you through a three-step stage.
Yep.
I just talked about Agile increasing the quality of collaboration between the business and application developers in building stuff quicker and better.
Right.
Not only quicker, but better, because the business is involved more closely. So that's great. Now we have DevOps, which has extended the scope to actually deploy the stuff into production quicker without making any concessions to the quality of IT operations. So that's great. So we've built the stuff, we've got it into production, but as yet, absolutely no value has been realized, because until the users use the systems, there's no value. It's only value when the business uses systems. And what interests me in particular is extending this great flow of multidisciplinary collaboration from the Agile area, from the DevOps area, which focuses primarily on deployment. And I like to extend it into the next area, which is a closer collaboration between IT operations and the users. I think that is often, that's the weakest link in the chain. From your experience, I'm sure, just as yourself as a user of information systems, but think about enterprise users. How well do they actually use systems? Are they using them effectively and efficiently? And often that is not the case. There was some research in the Netherlands at a university in 2012 where they took a look at productivity loss in enterprises due to IT problems. And the research pointed out that between 6 and 10% enterprise productivity is lost, regular business productivity, due to IT problems.
Okay.
Half of that is due to problems in the systems themselves. So either systems, maybe somebody designed the wrong system, maybe the system was built incorrectly, or maybe it was not made available or reliable with a necessary degree of competency. But the other half of the productivity loss was due to users not using the systems properly. And I think that truly is, that's the missing link in the chain, is helping the users to get value out of the systems. We often have we know the role of a key user or a super user, which is a colleague in your department. You know, if you're working on a system and you have a problem, the first thing you do is usually to look around and say, John, could you know, you're an experienced guy, could you help? Have you got this problem? Do you know how to deal with it? And John's been appointed either formally or informally as the super user in the department. What I would like to do is introduce the concept of a super duper user, which extends that a little bit more. John, our super user, is reactive. He's doing his daily job and he's very happy to help anybody who has a problem, but somebody has to go to him. What I would like to see is a super duper user who is proactively looking around in the department, seeing how people are using the systems and helping them. Say, you know, if you do it this way, it'll be a lot easier. And did you know that this function will do this for you? Did you know what happened? I'm the same kind of user as everybody, I think. You get into a pattern of using an application, you're pleased that you know how it works, and you don't want to experiment. I haven't got time to experiment, I just want to get something done. But there could be a much more effective way or efficient way of doing my work if only a super user would help me. So getting back to DevOps, we've seen the Agile movement, we've seen the DevOps movement. And what I now talk about is I'm still playing around with the name. I started off calling the ValOps movement, value operations, but I'm now calling it the outside-in ops movement. And that's about the outside in, the business perspective, how to help the users get more value out of the systems. And now that's three things. What I'd like to do is I'd like to extend that even to a fourth thing. So we've got the Agile stuff, the DevOps deploying it quicker. Then we put the users getting the value out of the systems. But just going back to the start, when you certainly if you develop software in an agile way, people talk about a product owner, somebody who represents the business, tells the developers what kind of functionality they should be building. Something that I've come across recently, and I've been, when I realized this, I've been asking more and more people as to the quality of the knowledge of the product owner with respect to the operational practicalities that people have when they use systems. And what I've discovered is that many people in agile development say our project owner knows what kind of functionality he or she wants, but isn't really familiar with the nitty-gritty of the daily day-to-day practice, which results in, very well intentioned, the product owner saying, we want this stuff, so the developers build it, the DevOps guys shifted into, deployed into production, and IT operations provides it to the users. But then the users say, how on earth could you think up this? This doesn't fit into our daily work practices. So we've got this, and this is the fourth part, and I haven't got more than 4 at the moment, so this is where I'm going to stop this little part of the conversation. So we've got the agile development, DevOps deployment, the improving the use, but I'd also like to see that within the business, and this is what I call business alignment, which is a strange type of term. We often talk about business IT alignment because we see business and IT as sometimes as 2 separate entities, which is probably the wrong way of looking at things. But even within the business, you often have misalignment. So I'd like to get the people who define the functionality to be more aware of the non-functional requirements in business operations. So that's another gap I'd like to address. And I must reference my very good industry colleague Dave Van Herpen. And I'll send you a link to a paper we wrote on ValOps and to a webinar we conducted probably about half a year ago, in which we explored this area of agile DevOps and what happens beyond DevOps. It might be interesting for our audience to follow.
Sure, I've just made a note of it, and I'm gonna send an email to you so that I can give that necessary information. Okay. Well, now there are other frameworks, for ITSM, like MOF, Microsoft Operations Framework from Microsoft, and there is COBIT. I know that COBIT is, it's a framework for IT governance. So, can you let us know what are the pros of this MOF and COBIT with respect to ITSM? Do you want to, have you observed any kind of good things in Microsoft Operations Framework or COBIT, with respect to IT governance? So, and what are those good things that you've observed, and how would you want to elucidate them?
Yeah, I took a look at the Microsoft Framework many years ago when it just came out. To be honest, I haven't looked at it recently. I couldn't possibly comment on that.
Okay.
COBIT, I have taken a look at. In fact, I've written a white paper comparing COBIT and our BSL framework because they sort of slot into each other quite nicely. But in general, what I'm seeing is that enterprises have a tendency to adopt multiple frameworks, as opposed to, you mentioned sometimes people regarding ITIL as the Bible, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So this is everything. But people are deviating from that standpoint and saying ITIL contains very valuable stuff. We are going to use part of ITIL and part of COBIT and part of TOGAF and part of BSL and part of other frameworks. We're going to combine them to make a way of working practices that fit our organization. So instead of blindly implementing all the practices in ITIL or COBIT or whatever framework, you've got to think, step back a minute, what kind of problem do I have? Because we just mentioned COBIT with its very strong emphasis on on governance and demonstrating that you've got something under control, monitoring things. If you work for an organization which places a lot of emphasis on having to prove stuff, if it's highly regulated, in the healthcare industry, for instance, you've got to ensure that every step of the development of medication is tracked and traced. Or in the financial industry, where things are highly regulated with Sarbanes-Oxley, you will probably be looking in your IT organization for ways to demonstrate that you've got things under control. Whereas if on the other side of the scale, you're working for a very dynamic, young, small startup organization working in an extremely dynamic marketplace, where their very conscious strategy is to take risks and act quickly in the marketplace because otherwise they won't survive or succeed, then they probably won't be interested in COVID in the way in how COVID is often applied, rigorous controls. They're just going to wing it, and they are going to, because they have a high risk appetite, they are going to very consciously take risks, so they don't want to be bagged down, slowed down with lots of baggage. So it depends very much on the kind of organization. By the way, I'll reference another guy. In the 90s, there was a professor called Martin Uboyen in the Netherlands who really erect a statue for the guy because he's done such great work for the industry. He did a lot of work on professionalizing IT management in general. And one of the things that he taught me was, when you think about how to organize your IT or your IT department or IT function, you've got to realize that the way of working that you choose, how you implement IT processes, depends on two things. It depends on the characteristics of the systems that you're managing on the one side, and the characteristics of the organization on the other side. I just talked about the organization. If it's a very conservative organization, of course, that will reflect how you organize your IT. If it's a very dynamic, informal organization, of course, you'll organize your IT in a different way. On the other side, if you look at the kind of information systems that you're managing, if we're talking about an ERP system, SAP for instance, which is absolutely the backbone of the enterprise, and which thousands of people depend on enterprise-wide to support their work, obviously you will organize IT management differently for that backbone system than for an app on my smartphone, which is a sort of a personal productivity tool, which is very helpful, but is a completely different kettle of fish than SAP. So when you're applying ITIL or any other framework, you've got to think about what kind of systems are we applying this to, what is appropriate for these kind of systems, how much rigor do we need, and which kind of organization am I working in, what are how the cultural kind of norms as well. How do people, if people are naturally closely collaborative, then it probably won't be a good idea to define strict divisions of responsibilities and handovers, because it doesn't work that way. Whereas if an organization is fairly bureaucratic, then it's probably better to define bureaucratic formal procedures, because people are comfortable with those and they'll adopt them more easily than when you sort of confront them with a free-for-all way of working. So it's so back to your question about the various kind of frameworks. In comparison to ITIL, ITIL's got great stuff, but other frameworks have as well. And I think you've got to think outside in. What's the problem I'm trying to solve? And which parts of which frameworks can I combine to develop capabilities for myself, for my organization, that fit my organization.
Okay. Okay, Mark, that's really great information that we've got. Thank you very much for your time. Seriously, we've got quite great information, and I have made some notes while you were talking. So I'm gonna come back to you in an email, and then hope you would come back to me, or you would reply me with all the necessary links and all the necessary any other relevant information that will be helpful for our audience. So that's it from my side. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure, great privilege to contribute to your community. Goodbye now.
Thank you. Same here. Thank you very much. Have a great day ahead. Bye-bye.